From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. This is a bank episode, so good news! This is the first week that Jim doesn't have to issue any apologies. There's a first for everything. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Listen, it's a long show, Nick. Anything could happen by the time we get to the apology segment. You don't know.
That's true.
I might find something I need to apologize for. So
I'm sure you will.
So this is one of the first and it is the apologies thing. A lot of people have noticed, like, Jim, you seem to slam a lot of things. Like, that's my therapy, guys. That's what I do. So it always seems to come out on the other end. But this is a rare bank episode because you are, as people listen to this, where are you? So in the future of 2 weeks from now, you are in one of the we should do like a Where in the World is Nick, like Carmen Sandiego, and you should just take pictures of places.
If it was any place exciting, I would say, yeah, let's do that. But it's not.
You know what?
I think I will have come back from Minneapolis and on my way to Reno.
Okay. You know what
you should do? For my second trip to Reno.
During your trip, you should snap random shots, like from airplanes, not like very distinct things, not like a welcome to sign, but you should snap random shots.
Guess where I am?
Yes, and you should post it onto our Pod Therapy Twitter, and then you should say, guess where I'm at, and like just see if somebody can randomly. That would be so much fun. Yeah. Even knowing the 5 or 6 cities that you're going to be going through, that would be an interesting thing because I don't know that I can detect which place is which, especially if they're buried in snow.
Well, yeah, and if it's in the Midwest, it all looks the
same. It's all the same. I think people are just going to tweet with, "Oh, who cares?" What do you guys think? Am I in Iowa? Huh? Am I in Minnesota? It was like, who cares? Wherever you are, it's bad. Well, speaking of how to overcome adversity, which has nothing to do with what we just talked about, we are going to talk about a really interesting study that we just caught on the interwebs. It was titled Fighting Materialism in Adolescents. So what's interesting about this is there's been like an array of studies that I've seen in the last year that have been linking materialism to everything from depression to anxiety to addiction. Whenever we as humans are overly materialistic, overly infatuated with what's cool, what's trendy, possession, money, and just like the game of the rat race of life, when we're overly connected to that, it tends to be very unhealthy, for the human. So this new study came out that was saying, hey, is there a way to sort of dial that down in teenagers who are very vulnerable to that and go through a lot of this and are really affected by it? And the study actually came out with a really interesting method for this. So first I want to talk a little bit about the study. So the study was published in the Journal of Positive Psychology. It was identified, in it they identified a strategy to decrease materialistic tendencies and attitudes in teenagers. So here's what they did. The researchers surveyed 900 teenagers, and basically they assessed their attitudes on materialism. Then they gave one set of teenagers this assignment of keeping a daily gratitude journal, and the rest of the teens were asked just to keep a regular journal. So a daily gratitude journal is whenever at the end of your day or at some point in your day, you make a quick list of, let's say, 3 things that you're grateful for just that day. And it could be as simple as, I was grateful that my friend had time to meet me for lunch. I'm grateful for that person and their friendship in my life. I'm grateful for this new book that I'm reading or whatever. I'm grateful for the Pod Therapy podcast because it gets me through everything in life. It said nobody ever. So, it's whatever you want to write down. But they had these teenagers do that. And one group did a gratitude journal every day, and the other group just kind of kept a journal. So after 2 weeks of journaling, all the teens were reassessed. They kind of told them, okay, thanks for doing the experiment. They reassessed them. And then they gave every teenager 10 $1 bills and told them, oh, this is just a thank you for participating in the experiment. And they told the kids, hey, you can use this money however you want. If you want, you can donate to your favorite charity. You can tell us where you want it sent. Or, you can keep it, do whatever you want. So here's what happened. The results of the study showed that not only did the teenagers who kept a gratitude journal show huge decreases in materialistic tendencies in the post-surveys, but they also, on average, donated 2/3 of that money to charities, compared with the other group, the control group, who did not do a gratitude journal. They donated less than half on average. So that's a huge piece of like obvious data there. So the researchers pointed out that materialism is now linked to anxiety, depression, social isolation, and actual ill physical health. The results of the experiment could help inoculate a generation of youngsters against the, quote, villainous depravity of the bourgeoisie and bolster the just values of the proletariat revolution.
Those are big words.
Yeah, I thought I also may have added that last part from the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx.
I was going to say that.
Doesn't make it not true.
I've read some research articles, and I've never seen language
don't commonly
like that.
Reference the revolution of the proletariat.
Yeah.
Not as often as I'd like, but really interesting data, right? Because materialism has an ill effect on our health and our mental health, and here there's a way to measurably take a chunk out of that in teenagers over just 2 weeks. They changed these kids. These kids gave real tangible money to real charities as a result of just being asked to reflect every day on what they're grateful for. That's tremendous.
Right, and with a study of 900 teenagers.
Yeah, it's good data.
So that's pretty statistically significant.
That's really good.
That's a good, that is a good study with some really positive results. So.
Right. And materialism, I think for me, I've noticed this in my life. Like this is something where my wife and I have had to struggle with at times because I think that President Obama, I heard talking about this the other day on the news. He was saying, when folks start looking around at their peers and their colleagues and see how they're living, if they sense that they're not living very well, they become upset about that. And then they start asking, well, what are the systems in my nation that maybe don't allow me to succeed or whatever, right? And so that's fair, right? I think that conversation happens. But we also call that keeping up with the Joneses, right? That you always look at your neighbor, you look at what's going on, you think, oh, they just bought a new car. Like, can we afford that? Or they have hard floors. Like, can we have that? Or whatever. And like, we as a couple have had to check ourselves because we sometimes get stuck in that mentality. And because we don't have hard floors because we have carpets, we'll get really discouraged and feel like, oh, we're not doing enough in life. Like, we're not working hard enough. We're not, as successful as other people. And it's like, wow, we went from being happily married, got kids, we're healthy, things are good, to we're sitting here moping and pouting because we don't have hard floors. Like, that is so dumb, but that's the poison, I think, of materialism is that it causes you to self-doubt and to like compare yourself to anybody and everybody who might have it better than you. And like, that's never good for you. Like, it's very poisonous.
Which again goes back to something we talked about in the show in the past, how social media has had an impact on mental health.
Yes.
Because the only thing that has done, social media, I mean, as far as like Facebook and all that, is it has made it easier for you to compare yourself to other people.
Right.
And it has distorted what's actually happening in that person's life.
Yes.
They will post their highlights.
Yeah.
Right. So you compare your life to their highlight reel. And
you're backstage.
Exactly.
Right.
And so
to their front stage.
In a situation where otherwise you would not have been able to do that. Now we live in this age of technology where it becomes really easy to see what other people are doing.
Right.
And now we're seeing this rise in depression.
Yes.
They go hand in hand.
It does. And it just appears to be. We now have data that you and I have reviewed before, which says without question, the more you use Facebook, the more likely you are to report depression, or the more you use Instagram or whatever else.
Right.
And it's that comparative analysis that we're doing in our minds. So what's funny about this study is I had never read the study, but this is something I did in my life with my children. So, when I pick up my kid from school, I have an 8-year-old, and he's in 3rd grade. And like, whenever I pick up my kid from school, I do the typical parent thing, which is every parent does this. And we all ask, why the hell do we do this? But when you pick up your kid from school, you say, so, how was your day? And they go, good. What'd you learn today? I don't know. No. Right? Or what'd you do today? I don't know. Lots of things like math. Like, oh, okay. And like, it's very hard to start a conversation with your kid at the end of the school day because every day of theirs is different, but it's also very much the same. And as a parent, it's hard to like even ask probing questions. So what I started doing with my son, just as something I thought would be therapeutically valuable, I thought it'd be a good thing to do with my kid, is when I pick him up and I'm driving home, I'll say, so buddy, how was your day? And he goes, whatever, it was a good day. Like, it's always just good, or okay. Mm-hmm. And I go, what's something you're grateful for today? And that was something I just started doing on the drive home. Just, what's something that you were grateful for today? What's something that happened today that you're thankful for? What was nice? And it's powerful because the very first time I asked him that, I noticed that he stopped and thought about it. And there was a silence in the back seat, and he's kind of like, huh. And then, every day he kind of says something different. And he'll kind of be like, oh, today my friend shared their snack with me. That was nice of them. And I'll be like, oh, and then it launches into a whole conversation, right? Because I'll be like, oh, this kid shared their lunch with you? Yeah, his name is, Billy, and I like Billy, and we play kickball together, and, he's my friend. And okay, great. And now we're talking about what's good in your life, right?
Right.
When so often we only notice what's missing. And I've noticed, like, doing that with my kid, I realized I need to do that. Like, I need to do that every day. Like, I need to start checking with myself and start my day with that gratitude inspection of, like, what am I grateful for at the end of the night? And like maybe just when you're brushing your teeth, just ask yourself, like, what am I grateful for today? What happened today? I think that's a huge way to, counteract what we might call those materialism tendencies where we compare ourselves to others.
Right. And what you're doing is you're priming your brain for picking up on future information.
Yes.
Right. So it's like that cognitive bias, where we will notice things that we're already thinking about.
Right.
Right. So if we're priming our brain for what are the things that we're grateful for, we are more likely then to identify positive things that happen to us in the moment.
Right.
And so we give those things more credit, more credence.
Because we're already looking for them.
Right, than what we would otherwise.
I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, so if all we ever do is, compare ourselves to people who have things better than us, then we're priming our brains to pick up on that information. And then that's the thing that will stick out. We'll see 100 positive things happen, but we'll find the one negative thing and we'll say, this fits with my
But it's so powerful, right? Because as an adult, I look at this technique and I go, wow, this research bears this out. In 2 weeks, they changed those teenagers, right?
Right.
And I think, my God, what would the power be in my life if every day I just wrote on a sticky note, or I put it in a note in my phone, or I tweeted, today I'm grateful for thing. I just think that'd be so powerful. But I want to make sure the listener understands, I cannot overstate the significance of doing this with teenagers. We now live in a world. When I was a kid, the only time I was even aware that there was commercial materialism was during actual commercials during Saturday cartoons. Like, you'd be watching, like, Toys R Us kid would be on there and be like, I would be a Toys R Us kid. I'd be like, I want a race car. And, like, that's when I'd notice it, right? But otherwise, I was out kicking balls and not caring about life. Kids today, man, they are saturated with advertisements. Every video game they have has little ad breaks. They're constantly being smashed with this. And then technology, I think, has become this huge thing. Like, kids walking around with their little Switches or their iPads or whatever's going on. And, like, especially teenagers with cell phones. Like, who has the cooler phone? Did your parents get you the upgrade or whatever? That, like, checking in on everybody else's status is so apparent. And like kids using Facebook and Instagram, they're constantly able to measure themselves by one another. And that materialism preface is so toxic and so dangerous. And so if you, the listener, have a teenager in your life, this is something I really want you to notice, because not just because of who they are going to be and what their character is, which is, I would argue, is also very dangerous. And like, I don't want their character to be spoiled by materialism, but also for their own mental health. They will be happier and physically healthier if you can start creating a culture in your household and your family where you're taking stock of what you're grateful for regularly. And as Nick said, priming them to be searching. Now they're looking for things in their life that go well so they can be grateful for it. Even small things, somebody sharing a stick of bubble gum, or, we got that buy one, get one, hot dog at that place. Like, that's all it takes. But man, that'll change your life. And that could really change the future of your kid.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is something that I think, as you said, it's getting to be a bigger deal.
Yes.
But this is something that's been around for a long time.
Right.
I mean, it's a concept that's always, I think it was Shakespeare that said something like, I complained about not having shoes until I met somebody who had no legs.
Wow.
Type thing,
Wow.
I mean, and a big part of psychology is just learning new terms for stuff we already know. Like, there's really nothing inherently new about this other than that now we have data to support what we already knew.
What we probably knew.
Right.
Yeah, which I think is true.
It's all about
But here's
gratitude.
something I've noticed in life, right? So you and I, we live in fabulous Las Vegas where we broadcast our show. But we're both from different places. And what's interesting is I've noticed that the regional culture of America, there's people that come from different places in the United States where I notice this kind of thing that we usually say, they're humble people. They're salt of the earth. They're genuine, or things like that. They don't seem fake. Like if you go west to California, to LA, or if you go up to New York, Manhattan, people will describe people as like, they're very fake. They're all very superficial. They're very materialistic. And what's interesting about that is different regions of the country, I think, have adopted this kind of a culture where there is sort of a gratitude for what you have, and there's some kind of ability to try to change that perspective, which ultimately I think goes so far to actually change the way we think about those humans. We describe those humans differently. That's the power of this, how it can change a whole life. Like the humble folks from Iowa, where you come from. You know, they're grateful just to have a stalk of corn.
We're just good old farm folk.
Yeah, just 100% of you are on farms.
Yep.
And,
no cities in Iowa.
That's right. If the tractor started today, it's a good day.
Good day. Good day.
Well, good research anyway.
Yeah.
Good research. So everybody that's listening to this, start your day with an attitude of gratitude, or do something where you're challenging the teenagers, the children in your life. I don't think you can start this young enough, to be honest with you.
I agree.
This could be something where when you're tucking your kid in at bedtime, whatever your nighttime ritual is, ask them, hey, what are you grateful for today? What's one thing you're grateful for? And then share what you're grateful for too. Oh, what happened to me today? I was grateful that I did this. And teaching them how you also search for things that you're glad for will fundamentally change their character and also make them healthier, I think, in the end. Mm-hmm. And that's what the data says.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will discuss how to help a family member with an addiction. You're listening to Pod Therapy. This week's Theraproducer sponsor is Jake Schneider. You're awesome, Jake, and we super respect that you give at the $20 a month level and somehow added one extra penny.
1 penny.
To become the majority shareholder
of the Theraproducers. Chairman of the board.
Thank you very much, Jake. We definitely appreciate your support. If you would like to join the party to help make the show possible and tap into this special content for patrons only, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's www.patreon.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about a family member with an addiction. Future tripping. On your podcast at Scoopfest, you mentioned in passing something called, quote, future tripping by people with addictions. My sister, who we'll call Anne, is addicted to heroin and benzodiazepines and has been for a decade. She's also been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. We, her family, are trying to get her into treatment again, but every option we present is turned down because, quote, I tried it and it didn't work. I'll do it to make you happy, but it's going to be agony. I'll probably lose my job because I can't work while being in treatment, and I'm just going to relapse anyway, so why bother? Things like that. Then she usually implies that she will kill herself since things are so pointless. She has a very particular treatment plan that she says she will commit to, but we can find no provider who will do all of that, and the ones who will do part of it are not good enough to meet with the above statements. My sister's despair scares my parents, and they've ended up enabling her addiction at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars. I've given up trying to argue with her using logic, and she will not commit to seeing a therapist or addiction counselor since she's, quote, already tried it. I am trying to follow the general advice to family members of people with addictions. Focus on me, I can't fix her problems, she has to make the choice, etc. I'm seeing a therapist on my own, and I'm part of a family support group for people with loved ones who are addicted, and I've convinced my family to attend a family therapist a few times. But we can make no headway against Anne's I know it won't work attitude. Is her attitude future tripping or something else? If it is it a symptom of her addiction, her anxiety, both, neither? If we got her into treatment, would this go away after she detoxes, or is it indeed pointless to try treatment because she is convinced that it won't work? Thank you, Anonymous.
So this is a good question.
It is.
Kind of going back to one thing that we said with the future tripping. No, this isn't really exactly what we're talking about as far as the future tripping.
Not the same thing. Yeah.
Well, no, it's different.
What, future tripping versus this?
Yeah, this is more just future tripping is like when you worry too much about something that it distracts you from the present moment. That's not really what's going on here.
Okay.
What she's doing here, this is more just I don't want to use the word treatment resistance or the term because it's not really resistance. It's just there's a lot of reasons why somebody doesn't want to go into treatment.
Right.
Part of it can be excuses that they make because they're just not ready to stop.
Yes.
Some of it could be just a lack of confidence, or they just feel so bad about their current situation they don't believe that change is possible. So then, therefore, what's the point of trying to make an effort to do it?
Right.
Anything? There's a lot of reasons why. But either way, it doesn't really matter. I think the big issue here isn't necessarily the term future tripping. I think the issue is how do you help your sister?
Yes.
That, to me, is kind of the baseline of all of this. So there are the 3 C's of Al-Anon.
Okay.
Okay, so
Let's start with what is Al-Anon.
I'm going to, yeah.
Okay.
So Al-Anon, we've all heard of AA meetings,
Yes,
Alcoholics
Alcoholics
Anonymous, right? Al-Anon is like that. It's a 12-step program, but it's not for the alcoholic. It's for the family members of the alcoholic.
Yes.
Okay? Because it is a family issue, and the people who are around the addict or alcoholic, they need help just as much as the addict or alcoholic.
Right.
So it's kind of a support group. So they've got what they call the 3 C's. And so the 3 C's are understanding we didn't cause it, we cannot control it, and we cannot cure it.
Yes.
And it seems really simple, but those are the 3 things that family members get caught up in the most.
Wow.
And it is the thing that it keeps them stuck into this cycle of unhealthy behavior.
Yes.
And a lot of times enabling the addict because they have this idea that, well, if I change this, I can control what this person's doing.
Yes.
Or I can cure this problem if I do this.
Right.
And none of that is true. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it.
Yes.
The sooner you can get you and your family members to understand and fully practice those 3 C's, it's going to help you out tremendously.
I think so. And another piece of this that I think is important that I'm noticing, again, I would argue that we might be comfortable using the concept of future tripping here because she's predicting failure, right? So Anne, the sister in the story, she's anticipating failure and therefore saying, well, why try? Which, again, gets us off the present moment to the point where we're thinking about 3 turns down the road. So why start driving now if the road's going to be closed when I get to the state line? Well, let's deal with that then, right? Like, let's focus on doing the next right thing right now. So I would see myself being comfortable talking about it as future tripping, but I agree with you. There's so much more going on in this. Future tripping is actually the least of your problems.
Well, and here's the other thing, too. Let's answer... For Anne. Anne is the name of the person
addict
we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's a question underneath the question, right? So, or a problem underneath the problem. What Anne is doing is she's identifying a problem, but that's not really the issue.
Right.
Okay? When we say, well, it's not going to work because I've tried it before, all right? Yeah, she is kind of predicting the future there. That is a problem. But that's not the problem. That's what Anne is throwing out as the problem.
Oh, yeah. That's a distraction.
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah. That's a decoy.
This is what addicts and alcoholics
do
are
all the time.
Awesome at doing, is they are awesome at changing the conversation to something else other than what the issue is.
Here's what I want you to notice, Anonymous. You're no longer talking about Anne. You're talking about treatment. You're now sitting around scrutinizing all the different methods and modalities and all the possible discussions about philosophies and where we do things and how we do things and how long things go and all the different ways to do it. And in the meantime, nobody's paying attention to Anne. So Anne has gotten this whole conversation to be about all the possible solutions instead of the problem at the root of it. And so, like, whenever Nick and I worked at a rehab, when people would come in and they'd give us that business and they'd say, well, the only way I'm coming here is if you guys do X, Y, and Z, and I need to be able to bring my dog, and I need to be able to smoke, and I need to be able to have freedom every day to go to the mall because that's very important to me, and I also have some business I need to conduct, so I'm going to need my cell phone and a laptop and an office all to myself, and also I won't be going to group. I will not be going to group therapy at all because I've tried that in the past. It's not very helpful, and also I understand that you make people go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and Narcotics Anonymous meetings. Well, I've done that in the past as well, and I'm not going to be participating in that, and at some point, we usually sit that person down and we go, hey, guess what? We're going to do this our way.
Right.
We're not going to do it your way. And here's why. Your way doesn't work. You've tried your way and it has failed in the past. It isn't that Alcoholics Anonymous failed. It isn't that Narcotics Anonymous failed. It isn't that different programs failed. It's that you, the same person who showed up to those things is showing up to this, you've failed. And usually the reason we think that you failed is you do not surrender to the process. Until you give up doing it your way and you let somebody else steer the car, you're destined to have the same problems because you are resistant. You're fighting this.
Right.
There is no treatment plan on earth that will succeed against the patient who fights us.
And I can speak to personal experience from having worked in this field for 15 years that there is a common pattern I see in the people who are successful and the people who are not.
Right.
The ones who I find that are very successful and they've got long-term recovery, they are the ones that if you ask them, what are the things that you won't do to stay clean and sober? They're the ones that say, nothing. There's nothing on that list. There is no list of things I won't do to stay clean and sober.
Yes.
The ones who have conditions behind staying clean and sober are the ones that are not ready to accomplish it.
Do you remember Mitch's list?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was one of the most powerful things I ever saw, and we've mentioned it on the show before, but we knew this therapist who, whenever he sat down with somebody that was like treatment resistant or having problems, he'd give them a blank piece of paper and he'd give them a pen, and he'd say, hey, go ahead and write down for me everything you're not willing to do to recover. I'll wait. And if they picked up the pen, he'd tell them, get out. You're not welcome in my program. I don't want you here. And they'd be like, well, why? Because there is nothing that goes on that list, right? If I told you to stand on your head and whistle Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star while drinking a cup of juice, you do that because your way doesn't work. Don't question my way. Let's get to the results, right? But people constantly do this, Nick, because they say, well, I'm only willing to go to a place that has horses, or I'm only willing to go to a place that's like got a beach. And it's like, hey, you're focusing on the wrong thing still. You're still not seeing how sick you are, how this disease is terminal. It ends in death. It is chronic. It is progressive. It is terminal. And, you know, one of the things that Anonymous says about her family is that they have been enabling Anne because they are focusing on all the solutions instead of focusing on Anne. And until you box her in and you create an ultimatum situation where either you will go to any available treatment or you no longer have the resources of our support and our, helping you get through life, until you create that ultimatum, people will not get help, period. This disease is like a parasite. It will continue to eat resources until it is stopped.
Right. And to our listener, I'll tell you right now what's going to happen when you do that.
Right.
And it's not because I can predict the future. It's because I've had enough experience with this.
You know it.
I know what's going to happen.
Right.
Addicts and alcoholics, another very useful skill that they have for them, talent, is they've got the ability to turn anything into a hostage situation.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
If you do decide that you are going to set some very firm boundaries, which I think you should.
Wait, let's turn this into an acting role play, okay?
Oh, sure.
So you be the parents and I'll be Anne, and you tell me that this is it. I'm going to treatment.
Okay. We found a place for you. Your flight leaves in an hour. You're going to go to treatment.
No, I'm not going to treatment. I have a job. You raised me to be responsible, and I'm not going to be homeless on the streets because I lose my job.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
So, or another one is if
and if you don't get help, you're going to die.
Right.
Fine, I'll die.
Yeah, and this will be on your hands.
It's on your hands.
This is on your hands.
You killed your daughter.
Right.
You did this.
If they have children, that's the other thing too.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
so my children will just starve, Dad.
Yeah.
Is that what you want? No, we're going to watch over your kids. You can't watch over the kids. Look how I turned out.
Right.
There's always a reason.
Right. And that is going to be the tricky part for the family, is to not take the bait.
No.
I would really encourage you. You said you're already in therapy.
Yes, which is good.
Get your therapist to help out with this, as far as being able to set boundaries, being able to set very clear expectations with Anne.
Yeah, and
if
actually,
you can get an interventionist, that could be
that
helpful
is
as
what
well.
is necessary, and I'll tell you that. So here's something that I'll rarely say this in life because it's a little too into the weeds, but I will say it this time. If a person's seeing a marriage and family therapist for this and they're supporting you, that's fine for your own mental health. I think it's good that you have a therapist you're meeting with. However, in my experience, I work with everybody, right? So I have 2 licenses. I have an addictions license and I also have a mental health license. It is very rare that I have a colleague who has a mental health license, marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical social worker, that has any concept of addiction. And usually their advice turns out to not be very good. So in this situation, I want you meeting with an addictions counselor. I want you meeting with somebody who specializes in this. They have worked with people like Anne a million times, and that's your interventionist. That's your team captain. And that's the person your family needs to meet with, because they're the one who can tell you, here's how you win this game.
Right.
Boundaries is a good general life skill. It's a very good therapeutic device. But, Nick, in my opinion, addictions is so nuanced and so unique in the sphere of mental health. You need an expert just on that. And that needs to be the person you're meeting with, honestly. In my opinion, I feel like
I would
that's
agree
necessary.
too. And I would also, to piggyback off of that, I'll throw in Al-Anon
Yeah.
and Nar-Anon.
Yes.
Nar-Anon is kind of the same thing, except it's kind of geared towards narcotics. Any kind of family support. Talk to other families who've gone through the same situation that you're going through. That there's a wealth of valuable information there that people don't tap into.
Yes.
If you can talk to other family members, they can get you on the right track, and they can tell you what from their experience, because I guarantee they've tried everything.
Right.
If there's a method out there that didn't work, they know it doesn't work because they did it themselves and it didn't work.
Yeah, and I want to point out something. This is an unusual one. If you're a regular listener to the show, our usual method is we read something and then we kind of give feedback to like, okay, so this is what this person's doing. They're future telling, right? Or they're fortune telling. And this is a cognitive distortion. And like, here's the list of questions I want you to ask yourself to sort of like fix this. The reason we're not approaching it this way when we're talking about somebody in active addiction is because they are not capable of making therapeutic progress. They are not capable of getting to the nuances of how they're fortune telling and how they're getting in their own way, because the drug still has a hold of them. The addiction pattern, the cycle must be broken first. They are not capable of receiving really quality therapeutic insight until this problem is arrested. And so it really takes a chess game first. Before they're able to access therapeutic truth, we have to corner them. We have to get them into a place where they stop using and they are in a safe place. And that's the deal. It starts with that. So that's an unusual way that we're answering this question. We're not diving into cognitive distortions and all the other things we would do for anybody else, because addiction is a different animal, which again comes back to why I probably want you to have an addiction specialist in your corner, not just a therapist.
One last thing I'm going to give you some advice on is you're going to find out that setting boundaries is going to be very important. And I always say this to every family member. Do not set a boundary that you are not willing to enforce.
Yes.
Don't make threats. If you say you're going to do something or there's going to be a consequence behind her behavior, prepare yourself mentally for doing what you say you're going to do. Because the only thing worse than not having boundaries is setting a boundary and not enforcing it.
And get your family on the same page. If there's a weak link in the chain, she will find it. You have all got to be of one mind. You have to have a clear understanding. And this, again, addiction specialist will hold you guys accountable. We'll give you that mentality. We'll be the team captain that leads you to victory. But you guys have big work ahead. Standing up to this person, cornering them, giving them the ultimatum, letting them feel consequences. Only way they're ever going to change.
Yep.
Thanks for writing in.
Yeah, give us some feedback. Let us let us know what happens.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, we can springboard right into our next question, if that's okay.
We're short on time. Let's cut that one out.
We're not. We're 32 minutes in.
It's 1:55.
That's because of all the extra bullshit. But, I mean, that's fine. Like, we can cut it, but it'll be a 20-minute episode. Like, we're at 32 minutes right now.
Okay.
So we can run the...
What's your time like, Jake?
How you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah. You guys do your thing.
So do the recommended episodes one.
Okay.
And then we'll do the effects. Because right now we're perfectly on point.
All right. Our next listener writes in... Hey guys, love the show. Been listening to you since your episode on ICS and listened to the entire back catalog. I love the show and I have learned a lot in terms of mental health. I want to show my girlfriend a couple of episodes on her upcoming vacation, and I'm not sure which episodes to play for her. Do you have any suggestions? Love the pod. Thanks, Mo.
That's a good question.
Well, I would definitely recommend this one.
Yeah, this is the one.
This is probably the one.
Yeah, the one that you're listening to right now.
Yeah,
because this is the one that's about you, Mo.
Yeah, it's all about Mo.
It's about Mo and his lovely girlfriend, who I've heard great things about, Nick.
Definitely,
She's wonderful. Because
Mo tells
Mo's
us about her all the time.
Mo's always going on.
I don't know if you knew this, Jim, but did you know that Mo once saved 5 children from a burning building?
What a hero. Guys like that do not come around all the time.
I know, and he definitely deserves a really good girlfriend.
You know, a lucky lady out there has Mo, and I hope that she appreciates him because he's a really good guy. You know what else I've heard about Mo?
What?
I don't know if you knew about this, but Mo has been thrice nominated for the Nobel Prize in all the categories.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
But you know what? I believe it.
Yeah, because it's Mo.
Right.
Right? What can't he do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that Mo is able to speak 10 languages.
Wow.
But because he is very concerned about other people and he doesn't want them to feel inadequate,
right.
he doesn't.
He chooses not
He chooses to only speak one.
Because he has a heart of gold, Nick.
Right.
Mo is a good person. And you know why I know that Mo is awesome? He listens to Pod Therapy. And he tries to get other people to listen to it too.
That's it.
Only those kinds of people have all those qualities. So to Mo's girlfriend, first off, you're a lucky girl, okay? Hope you appreciate what you got. Got a man that tries to share gold podcasts with you. Also, please don't break up with him because he's trying to get you to listen to pod therapy.
Yeah.
Listen, we don't want to be the cause of all the breakups in the world. But yeah, I mean, depending upon what she's interested in, Mo, I think that the back catalog, it's funny because I don't think that we have like a keystone episode that's like the one that you should listen to.
Episode 13.
The one that you can't get? The one that doesn't exist?
The one that doesn't exist.
Yeah, you know what? That's my answer too. Episode 13.
In all seriousness, Mo, tweet. Ask listeners on Twitter, or on Patreon, because
every episode's so different.
Asking us the best episode is probably not a good idea.
We hate them all.
We do.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll tell you this, Mo. The one of the things we try to do when we set up our episodes is we always title them the topics that we're going to be talking about. And so maybe even giving her, the ability to flick through a few and just go, is there anything in here that catches your eye? That's honestly how I think this show catches on, is I don't think that somebody says, hey, are you interested in a show about therapy? People will go, no. But you'll be talking at the water cooler with your coworker or with your girlfriend, you're driving on a trip, and she's like, yeah, I have a friend that's going through anorexia or something like that. And you're like, oh, yeah, this therapy podcast, they had a show in here about anorexia, and you start flipping through it with your thumb, and you're like, yeah, here it is. The one on Pro Anna. Do you want to, these guys talk about that? You want to hear about that? Okay, let's do it. And so, that's, I think, how it happens.
We have a topic for everything.
So, yeah, I would just give her that and let her thumb through it. But the most important thing here, Mo, is that you're the kind of person who supports pod therapy by trying to, we don't have a phrase like obelisk. I don't know what word.
Obelisk?
Yeah. Is that how you pronounce it? Obelisk?
Yeah.
We don't have a phrase like that. So, but yeah, that you're out there trying to recruit and share is something that's really valuable to us. So, Mo, I'm sorry we don't have better answers for you, but we love you for what you're doing.
Well, the good news, Jim, is that this episode won't air for 2 weeks. So by the time he hears this, he'll already be back from vacation.
Yeah, and he will have lost interest in this podcast by now. Thank you, Mo. You're awesome.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will talk about the effects of bullying. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Smitty Scoop. Smitty was, of course, the very first TheraProducer and was a guest on episode 41, where he gave us great insights and feedback to questions. If you'd like to join the party and help make the show possible and tap into that special Patreon content, like hearing all the nonsense we just went over about obelisks, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next listener writes in about the after effects of bullying. Okay, so this one is titled The After Effects of Bullying. Whenever we hear the word bullying, we think of children being bullied in school. However, bullying happens to adults by adults. I was bullied severely by an adult woman for over 3 years at my workplace. She humiliated me, spread rumors about me, encouraged others to gang up on me, wouldn't allow others to be friends with me, and made sure I knew when she was excluding me or talking about me behind my back. I hardly stood up to her because, one, it's exhausting, and two, because I knew she would victimize the situation and turn it around on me and make me look like the aggressor. So I did my best to ignore her and take the high road. It's been about a year and I no longer work at that company or see her at all. I left in good standing and am friendly with many of the people that still work there, but I avoid my old workplace out of fear of being humiliated again by my bully. Sometimes I get stuck and relive flashbacks of things she said to me and how it made me feel. These thoughts sneak into my head and haunt me for days. This puts me in a bad mood and isn't good for my mental health. I try to distract myself with other things, and I try not to think about her and how she treated me, but it's not always possible. How can a therapist help one deal with the after effects of bullying? What can I do when I get stuck reliving past experiences? Shout out to all those THERAPALs out there and the Scoops, Salt Pork, Anonymous. Very good.
So first, I would say as a therapist, one of the things that I am not really a fan of is what I call a geographical cure.
Okay.
So I get this a lot of times too, especially working in addictions, where people will say like, well, that's my old playground. My stomping ground is over in this place and I just do bad there. So I'm going to move. And I think that there's some value in that, but that can't be your only solution, because what ultimately happens is you take your problems with you.
I agree.
And what she's dealing with right now is she's still dealing with the after effects.
The bully was a female. It could have been a male. which as I was reading that, I thought was interesting because I have had that situation where I have had a bully in my workplace that was a female, and because I was a man, it was very hard for me to somehow confront her because she would quickly make it look like I was aggressive or whatever, and I was scared of that.
Okay, point
So
taken.
anyway, it could be. I'm just saying, we don't know. But yeah, your
point.
point is geographic solutions don't work.
Right, but I think, to our listener, I think you did make the right call eventually. If you've tried dealing with this in a number of different ways, and if leaving the company is the solution that works best for you, that's great. So I can't say that you did the wrong thing there.
No.
I just want to make the point that I will encourage people to do that as a last resort. Try to work things out as best you
Right.
possibly can. But if it gets to that point where you just have to leave the situation, then you got to leave the situation.
That's fair.
That's good.
And to the writer, I mean, I'm not sure that they told us that's why they left. I think they just told us that they did.
That's
but
true.
I kind of
did kind of assume that.
Yeah, you assumed their gender. You've assumed their reason for leaving. There's just a whole lot of problems here. Okay, we're going to therapize you in a second.
You're angry about something. What is it, Jim? What are you upset
Because you're
about?
leaving for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just, I wasn't even a factor. You didn't even ask me if I was okay with it. So, all right, here's what I read in this. I see 2 problems. One, I see the problem of how do you deal with a coworker who's hostile and is using manipulative tactics to try to create an unhelpful and unsafe workplace, right? That's number one. Second problem is this lingering after effect, which
Right.
I look at and immediately spot intrusive thoughts, right? Because she's saying, or he is saying that, these past incidences and all these things that happened, and all things that were said to me, and all things that were done to me, and how many times I was left embarrassed and hurt and intentionally the victim of wounding. These things flash back to me, and they haunt me. And these things, which are very unhelpful thought patterns that sometimes flash into us and seem to haunt us and ruin our day, Nick and I will usually refer to these as intrusive thoughts. They're not welcome. They're not something that you sat down and began contemplating because they had some kind of utility in your life. They're something that just pop in, and it's like a pest. It's like, going through your house and suddenly finding a centipede, and it scares you, and it ruins your day, and it makes it an unsafe place, and you didn't want that. So how do you guard against those, and how do you kind of cure them when you see them? And one thought is, and there's many, many ways to address intrusive thoughts, but one is to subject the thoughts to questioning, right? Is this a feeling or is this a fact? Where's the evidence for the takeaway that I have on this thought? And when I look back on this thought, am I assigning an unhelpful interpretation to this memory that maybe isn't true, right? Because I saw myself as totally fumbling this and totally being humiliated and totally being embarrassed. And we've talked about this on the show before, that your humiliation is somebody else's non-event. Like, they don't even notice it. They're thinking about lunch. They are not thinking back to this that happened to you. You're haunted by it because it was significant, but that may be a false interpretation of what happened in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, and we've talked about it before on the show. And I think the other thing, too, going back to the after effects, and this kind of seems to be the theme of this show, we keep going back to our perceptions,
Yes.
right? And how events change our perceptions. So one thing that I'm hearing you mention is that you are now aware that going through this experience may have affected the way that you perceive new information coming in.
Right.
Right? So the victim of being bullied is more likely to identify signs of bullying again in the future.
Right.
Whether they are real or perceived, right? So it could be it's like having a sensitive spot, something that you're really sensitive about that you kind of identify and latch onto quicker than most people will.
Yes.
So the fact that you are already aware that this is a possibility, I think is really good. I think awareness is the first thing. To be able to understand that this is a vulnerability that you have, and that when things happen, you are going to have a tendency to view things through that lens.
Yes.
So number one, I think the most important thing is to realize that we always see the world through a lens.
Yes.
We cannot remove the lens. The best thing that we are able to do is recognize that it's there and adjust our lives accordingly. And that's where Jim's feedback of challenging the thoughts comes into play. Because once you've recognized that you have a lens, then now you start questioning thoughts that come through that lens. Is this reality, or is this just the way I see it through this lens of having been bullied at my last job?
I like that. And to the other question of how do you deal with interpersonal conflict in the workplace? So I think if you ask 5 people, 4 of them are going to say, go to HR. If you have a big enough company, tell your HR rep, complain to your supervisor, whatever. I'm that fifth person that says, okay, I realize that that's often ineffective, right? Or they just tell you, okay, please avoid the problem. They send some kind of like cautionary email to the person doing this, and then they use that against you anyway. And it's like, can you believe it? So-and-so, complained about me. We should all complain about her, or whatever. What I've found success with is whenever I approach the person. So the first thing I'll caution a person against in this situation is don't be venomous. Do not do fire with fire. It only makes it worse. It only gives them the fuel that they need to burn against you. Everything gets weird, especially if you're a male and you're being antagonized by a female. It is almost never to your advantage to come at them in the way that you as a male tend to solve interpersonal conflict with other males, which is usually pretty confrontational to the point. That will get used against you in this culture. Even though you are the victim, as soon as a man confronts a woman, he is no longer the victim. Like immediately we all rush to her side. So you need to be wary of how humans have these vulnerabilities to not detect truth as it is. So the way that I would want you to approach this, whether you're a male or a female, is I'd want you to approach the person privately. I'd like you to go to them individually, and I'd like you to have a conversation with them. And the way that that can go down is usually not, hey, why are you messing with me? Why are you a jerk? Because that's, again, not helpful, right? That's antagonistic. It assumes the other person is wrong. They're not going to sign on to that interpretation, so you still have further problems. But approaching them and saying, hey, like I'll do it with Nick right now. So Nick is the guy picking on me. And to say, hey, Nick, recently I've noticed a couple of things that made me feel like maybe I've done something that have made you mad. And I don't know if maybe I'm reading into this, but when we were in that staff meeting, I kind of said this and you sort of seemed to scoff and roll your eyes. And I kind of felt like you had sort of a laugh at my expense. And I figure I must have done something that kind of put a wedge between us to the point where maybe you think of me as somebody that, doesn't come off as a friend to you. And I don't like that because I really like you. And I hope that we're able to be friends. Am I reading into this, or is there something there? And do you notice how I framed that? So I framed it as, hey, I'm detecting this. I'm not sure if it's real. Hey, did I do something that was sort of off-putting? Now, they still might be a dick, and they still might just be like, no, everything's great, and like walk away and be a jerk. Okay, fine. But most humans, when confronted in a productive, authentic, genuine, disarming kind of way like that, most humans feel too fraudulent and too false to continue with the game. They'll usually feel like, well, I'm really talking to a real human, and they're really telling me that they notice this. And now that I'm confronted with it in a way that's digestible, I don't feel like I'm being put on the defensive. It usually causes me to think about what I'm doing now.
Right.
Does this feel childish? Or, well, it also gives me a way out, too, because I can be like, well, yeah, Nick, or Jim, when I first met you, you said this kind of dumb thing, and it was and I took that as a slight, and, I've kind of always been off put by that, and I guess since then I've never really wanted to be close to you. Okay, great. Now we're talking, right? Now there's content. Now there's revelation happening. We can do something from there. But this Cold War kind of thing is never helpful.
Right. And there's also a component here, where I think we see it a lot in teenage years that sometimes we kind of dismiss as adulthood, but I don't think it goes anywhere, is this idea of group cohesion and being part of the in-group.
In-grouping.
And part of that is because we have this part of our brain that still thinks that we're in the African wilderness, right? Where if we are alone and isolated, we're in danger.
Yes.
So that part of the brain is constantly feeding us information. You're in danger. You're in danger.
Group up.
Right. And so our natural defense is through our numbers, through having other people around us. We are the descendants of the people who felt the need to be part of a group.
Right.
Right. The ones who felt the need to be independent, they got wiped out.
Right.
So we still have that part of the brain, which is why a lot of times, like when we're in high school and it's the first day of school and you go to lunch and none of your friends are in the same lunch period as you are, so you're not sure where to sit, that part of the brain's like, oh my God, you're in danger.
Right.
Because that part of the brain still thinks you're alone and there's a lion that's going to come eat you.
So that's already a really tough hand to play.
Exactly.
And then somebody's bullying you in a group on top of that.
Well, and then so
really makes it harder.
Part of that is then too, is that idea of you being a threat.
Right.
So somebody else is coming into the group, which makes my membership of the group in danger.
Yes.
This could be my replacement.
Right.
Therefore, I need to attack this person so that I can stay in the in group and discredit the other person.
Absolutely. And
I think that happens a lot more in adulthood than we
It does. It really does. And I'm glad the writer talks about bullying, a word that seems juvenile and dumb to us, as an adult thing. I think it more often happens with adults than, honestly, I think it happens with kids. But I'll say this, the golden rule of bullies: hurting people hurt people, okay? anybody who is going out of their way to be antagonistic and dangerous or negative to other people is usually a hurting person. There's something going on inside of them that leaves them feeling like they're inadequate or like there's some kind of missing piece or that you're a threat to them, and they vent in your direction. And that's why you're their favorite toy to paw at, because it's just somehow nourishing to them. So by breaking through the mysterious kind of fog between you and humanizing yourself in their eyes, I think it has a profound effect on the bully, most of the time. And then, of course, obviously, there's the HR channels if that doesn't work. But thanks for writing in, and I really, encourage you to work on those intrusive thoughts. I think that'll be an area you'll really experience some relief in. So we do actually have an apology here at the end of the episode.
Damn it.
Dear Egypt and all worldwide cultures that have mono-towered structures with some points at the top, I am sorry that I called you obelisks. Apparently, you have an extra syllable. And so from now on, I will refer to you as obelisks. Right?
You still can't say it right.
It's the extra syllable.
Obelisk.
I thought that was the problem.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
I don't think he's going to get better. I think that's as good as we can
Good
hope
point.
for.
Yeah, all right.
I gave
we'll
it an
take
extra syllable. Everybody else can go to
Good
hell.
enough.
And patrons, because we recorded this one in the past, we're not going to go through the usual list of the thank yous, but just in case, because we don't want to leave anybody out in case there's some new THERAPALs or THERAPODs. But special thanks to all of you guys for joining the party. And if you have not already noticed, we have a book club that's going on Patreon, where we are reading our new book, and we're going to be going through that in November. And the book is, again, The Art of...
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
That one.
Mark Manson, I believe.
Yep. So by now, when you're hearing this, you've probably already picked up the book. If you have not picked it up yet, the book club's in full swing. It's never too late to join a book club. And remember the first rule of book club. So we do not talk
only
about...
talk... Oh,
you can only talk
sorry.
about books.
I got it backwards. Okay.
Yeah, the first rule of book club is we only talk about book club at all times. If you're at dinner with your mate, you only talk about book club until you've annoyed them into submission. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thank you to all of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can copy and paste the link in the description of this show, or go to Facebook at Pod Therapy, or at PodTherapyGuys on Twitter, or patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Joblesk.
Thank you, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.